Hi, and welcome back to this feature here today in the Educational Futures series. Again, the Educational Futures series is focused on new, innovative, unexpected approaches to technology, to pedagogy, to professional life out there that maybe is in some way an adaptation to some of the sober realities of COVID-19 as we move more of our operations online and continue to teach in these distance and virtual means. The video today is on Streamlabs OBS, multicam, and multimedia platforms. The emphasis today is on taking a home space, whether outdoors or more typically indoors, and turning it into a studio space that will allow you to provide the best possible opportunities for your students or professionals you're working with if you're running a meeting in terms of creating really a multicam and multimedia setup. We're emphasizing live streaming today, but keep in mind that with the live streaming programs I'm talking about, you could always record and have an archive of the video that you're creating to share later with people. Now, there are two other key videos you might check out. One is called Making the Most with Macros, and that talks about taking command of your workspace using things like the Elgato Stream Deck, which are incredibly handy in terms of turning your space into a more powerful one with key commands and keystrokes and hotkeys that allow you to do some powerful things in real time in meetings and applications and the like. And the second of those videos is called Stepping Up with a Stream Deck, and that specifically gets into using the Stream Deck, which is a really powerful tool by Elgato that allows you to do a number of things. In fact, one of the things I'll talk about today in our focus on live streams and Stream Deck OBS is really using something like a Stream Deck in real time such that you can do camera switching, and we'll talk about some of that later. I'm really intending in this video for us to consider ways to take total control of your space, whatever that space looks like. This is one example I have here up on the screen of how I might imagine using my home studio music and video space as a means of really projecting it in real time in a live sense using this program called Streamlabs OBS. One of the things you can do is set up multiple cameras. So if I have an extra webcam, I can set that up in a different space. We'll talk about technology and gear requirements. For me, for example, even though I have these extra USB cameras which simply plug into my USB ports on the computer and I'm ready to do my live streaming, as you can see the cords are very short, so I will talk about the need for some extension cords. You can pick up some very cheap 30-foot USB 3 extension cords for somewhere around $12 to $15. What I'm talking about in today's video is how can I use cameras or even digital microscopes like this one in a studio setup such that I can have multiple angles being presented at the same time. We'll talk about how you could do this in Zoom. The disadvantage with using Zoom, as I'll get into, is you can only do one camera at a time. There may be some options out there for you using a variety of apps. Some faculty have told me, for example, they've used the Virtual Cam app or something like that to add a second camera to their Zoom setup to make it a more powerful experience for students. And really anything that you might have available could potentially be used in this live setup. For example, if I have a HDMI capture card, which is simply going to take an HDMI input from an action camera or more typically maybe a DSLR, a nice video camera or a still camera, a Sony, a Canon or something like that, I could then take this, plug it into my computer, and it'll get recognized, and then I can use additional cameras in addition to those USB plug-in ones that we maybe are familiar with that allow me really again to take control of the setup and make it more innovative and exciting for students. So in the setup here, what I'm trying to show you is that within this space I have different cameras. I have a camera on the ceiling, I have cameras below, above, I could have a macro camera to pick up really fine details. Using all this equipment then I can have a more interactive studio setup that I can offer to my students in real time and also archive of course on video. And we'll get into using the OBS program. So you see this here on the left of the screen. It essentially comes as a blank canvas. All I have to do is start adding things, and those things can be any number of things. It could be a local video file, it could be an audio file, it could be a microscope, it could be a DSLR or a webcam, it could be a screenshot, it could be any number of apps, Twitter feeds, social media feeds. I could of course have live screen capture, which could be great for doing tutorials. So the idea behind this is really to create a multicam or multimedia setup. And I'm saying multimedia because you're not just limited to cameras like the ones I'm using now. So the multi-camera multimedia setups, in short, allow for the simultaneous, and that's in bold there, use of multiple cameras. It could be webcams, DSLRs, iPhones, digital microscopes, any other USB devices, mixers like my mixer here, microphones like this one, screen captures, live applications, YouTube, websites, Twitter feeds, and just about anything you can imagine in an environment that is customizable, controllable, and dynamic. And so what I'm trying to suggest today is that anything you can dream up can be used in real time and also recorded using a program like Streamlabs OBS. The other thing about multimedia and multi-camera setups, it's really about taking control of all the possible devices in media so that you're not limited in your teaching or professional work. It's about providing students with the more immersive and interactive approaches to teaching. We are limited to some extent teaching in digital or virtual means, but we can take advantage of all this technology to make that experience more interactive and immersive for our students. And then really these setups are about using technology and pedagogy, we'll talk about later, to deliver exciting forms of simultaneous or synchronous forms of teaching. So the real reason for doing this is not just because we love technology like I do, but it's about our students and making it a more professional, interactive, and immersive experience for all of them. Now, the multi-camera and multimedia setups do require some level of preparation. This may include getting technology, learning software, even hardware like I talked about, maybe a video capture card, and some time for learning and understanding these new approaches. I spent quite a bit of time learning, obviously Zoom in the past, but now really working through Streamlabs OBS to get a sense of how I can use it in my own classes and my own trainings. So we'll first discuss some approaches in terms of setting up a multi-camera and multimedia environment for your own workspace. Now, one of the things I recommend is you do an initial sketch of your environment, and I have it here on the screen. I wanted to try to diagram this. So I'm thinking of environment in two senses that I've discussed work environment in these Educational Futures videos. One is your physical space, so everything that's in the space in which you're teaching. If you're an art instructor, a bio instructor, chemistry instructor, it might be a lab space. That could be an art lab. You have your pottery set up, you have your kiln, you have a table maybe where you work on your pottery when you're fine-tuning it, and all those spaces potentially could be used in your virtual teaching. In a traditional physical classroom, of course, students can move around that classroom. Because we're all virtual now, we have to create our spaces within these virtual environments. And because we're all virtual now, of course, we have to create these spaces within the virtual environment and not in those physical environments. So that's like your first workspace to think about. The second would be your computer screen itself. You do a lot on your computer, running your Zoom classes, logging on the Canvas and so forth. You might also have some hardware and technology like the Elgato Stream Deck, which I have here. I might also have a microphone and some other equipment. But your computer is essentially the virtual hub of your work environment. So what I really envision in this video is to take your physical environment, like for me, this space with all my musical equipment, and then marry that, adhere that, if you will, to my virtual work environment and have the two work together, and hence this diagram. So what you see on the right here is I'm trying to then imagine the physical locations, the actual physical ones in my space, and how I can mirror those in the virtual environment using cameras, using technology, using forms of multimedia, and using a program like Streamlabs OBS to really deliver that marrying of the physical and the virtual environment together in real time and also in an archival video if you'd like. And so I'm really recommending that you also make a sketch like the one I've done here. So you could sketch out things like available technology, software, and hardware. So if you're using Canvas, of course, you would have that on your list. If you're using Zoom, you'd have that on your list. You can also list out hardware that you have available. So if you have certain cameras, webcams, or a capture card, jot those down, and then we can fill in later things that you may need to purchase. And a caveat about this is that in addition to learning, you do in some cases have to purchase some things to make the environments work for you. But I would argue, just like I did in the Stream Deck video, that it's definitely worth the time savings, and it's very much worth the pedagogical value that you'll bring to your students because of the greater interactivity and immersiveness of what you're delivering. And so as you're sketching things out, once you diagram your physical space like I've done on the right, fill in the technology, software, hardware that you have. And then second on the list is technology, software, hardware you'd like to purchase. You could also add in here, I haven't done this, concepts you're teaching. So for example, if you're trying to teach something about the pH level of a chemical or something like that, you would then want to say, well, how am I going to teach that? Do I use a virtual lab like Labster if I'm teaching chemistry, or do I actually have my own setup in my home and have the equipment I need and then deliver that concept? So concepts that you're teaching are really key because, of course, that's really what our goal is to deliver the content and high quality pedagogy that our students expect and love. And then any content sources out there as well. So if you want to take advantage of websites, media, the physical space itself, jot all those down and create a diagram like the one I have on the right here to give you a better sense of what you might be expecting. And what I would say is once you have a concept sketch diagrammed of your work environment and what you want to deliver using some live streaming technologies, you could always send it my way. We could have a conversation, or we could jump on for a Zoom session, and we can have a conversation about how you might be able to deliver some of those approaches or pedagogical ideas or concepts and content to your students. I'm pretty familiar with most of the technology out there, so I'm a good resource to run things by in terms of talking about how you might deliver some of this in the digital classroom setting. Now, this next chart here is really trying to get us to think about charting all of the possible components that we'll be talking about today. And really, I would think of this just as an approach to trying to map very globally all the possibilities out there in terms of components, whether media, camera sources, apps, forms of software, or social media, and most importantly, forms of pedagogy. So if you start off here at the top middle left, you would talk about video or camera sources. So any cameras you have available, or if you plan to purchase a camera, we'll talk about some of the costs later. Some of this is super cheap in terms of buying a webcam. I just picked one up on a flash sale on Amazon for 25 bucks. So they're not super expensive. You could very quickly add a second or third camera setup to your teaching with very little effort and very little money spent. Right top corner, we could talk about media. So one of the things you'll see in some of the streaming programs, including OBS, is you can have images, you can do real-time screen captures, you can have text up there, you can have audio, say from a mixer like mine here. I could have a video loop playing, a demonstration. I could have music coming from various sources, a microphone, and of course all those video sources that we will be talking about today. You can also have here on the left side of the screen apps and widgets. You'll see this in OBS and Streamlabs. You can have viewer lists, you can have event lists, spin the wheel, media shares, credits, stream bosses, and so forth. What's really cool about OBS is you get a blank black canvas and you can put everything on top of it with very little effort, and before too long you're running live on any of your favorite streaming platforms such as Twitch or YouTube. We'll save pedagogy for later in this video. Software could include using, of course, the freely available, totally free, no purchase required Streamlabs OBS, which I'll be focusing on today. We'll talk about Zoom in a second, which is kind of wonky for doing what we're talking about, but it's possible, but not in a synchronous sense in terms of second or third cameras, and certainly not media sources, as we'll be discussing today, such as live media sources on the internet and apps and so forth. You can also use something like Switcher Studio, which is a really powerful app allowing multicam setups in Zoom. The one big disadvantage I'll talk about later is the price. It's upwards of, I believe, $45 to $50 per month for a subscription. So I'm not going to recommend Switcher Studio just because of how expensive it is. And then on the right hand side, on the bottom, we could talk about social media. We could have Twitch or YouTube or other examples, and you can incorporate that in real time here in your streaming session, your live multicam streaming setup that could involve cameras, forms of media, and so forth. Okay, as we move away from looking at the components, we might ask about some software considerations. To deliver real-time live streaming and multi-camera, multimedia setups, you really do need to have software to deliver that kind of approach. That's going to require really the combination of all those components that we just talked about on the previous screen. So I think one question that comes up is, because we have access to Zoom right now, would Zoom work as an option? My answer is that it would work. However, you can only have one camera or USB source working at a time. you lack the control, as we've talked about with some of the issues with Zoom, and you can't certainly have a lot of the multimedia stuff that we've talked about. You can do a simple screen share, and you can have an image, a live video from your camera, but you can't have 4 or 5 different videos from different sources like we'll talk about playing at the same time. So what this looks like then is we can go to my Zoom page, and I have a session started here. So this is, traditional Zoom session that we're probably pretty familiar with. What I've done today is I have quite a few different sources, and this is getting into the extension cable issue. I don't have a long enough cable, but I actually have right here, I don't know if we can see it, we'll just pick it up here. I have my DSLR set up, and it's actually going. So what I want to do is to use that with my capture card as one of my sources. So my first source, and most of you already have one camera source on your computer or laptop, and that would be the webcam. So I'm using the main webcam right here for Zoom. I can go to the bottom of Zoom under video, and I can choose different sources. So the first one I might pick is my capture card. So I'll click on that. And my screen immediately locked up. So let's try a different one. Okay, I don't know why it did that. This may be proving my point here. Okay, so this is let me see if this is working. I think it is. Yeah, so I have this digital microphone set up. It's going to be really hard to use it right now, but you're seeing the source here on the screen. I don't have it quite in focus. There we go. And this is not a great microscope. I got it as a demonstration. It kind of functions almost like my macro lens on my camera, which I could also set up if I have a DSLR. So that's working. Now what you're seeing though is in real time, I can't have this and also the image of me and a screen share going at the same time. So it's showing you the real limitations. It's not a true live setup as we've been talking about or as I sketched out on that diagram. Let's switch to a different camera. This is another camera. And this is a webcam. This is the $25 one I picked up, which it's not too bad. You could see it has some latency, a little bit of delay there. It has a pretty bright, luminous image. We can go in and do adjustments on our camera, and that's one of the things we can certainly talk about later. Again, you're seeing my DSLR setup right here. I'm going to try to switch to that. So what I could do is I could have a number of these cameras set up during my class. If I were demoing something and I wanted an image of my mixer, if I was working on my mixer, my mixing deck, I could then switch from Zoom from my live webcam camera of my face, or maybe a tutorial of, say, some audio software on the computer. I could switch to this camera on my mixer. And then I could switch back. And again, I have to do this all in real time. There are some shortcuts we could talk about. I could go back to my main FaceTime web camera, so you're seeing me again here in front of the computer. So you're seeing immediately the disadvantage of this is the fact that you have to constantly switch the cameras. They're not going to appear in real time like they will in Streamlabs OBS, all in the same screen, all for your students to see. We'll end the meeting. And I just want to show you that this is the case. So I'm going to open Streamlabs OBS, the software. Okay, and again, this is the software I'll be recommending to you today to use for all your multi-streaming, multi-cam, multimedia setups. And you can see here already I have some of these set up. So I have a video loop, I have a live view of YouTube playing, and it seems for some reason like Donald Trump ads are streaming nonstop. Believe me, that is not my own doing. What I can do is, just to show you how this is going to work, I can add a new source. And one of those sources that is very useful for us is the video capture device source. And I can choose what this is, and then I will just go on here, and if I wanted to, I could add my webcam. So I'll add that. And then what's really slick about this, and this is all in real time, I can resize it, put it wherever I want. So I can have my one camera down here. You see my hand in front of it. I can have my webcam here. I have a video loop playing at the same time. I have a website, and I can continue to add. Let's see what this device is here. That is the microscope device. Just trying to get this set up so you can see it's a that's the microscope. So in real time here, it's my finger. It is just showing an image of the key, and then I can do another capture device, and this is, I want to really show you my capture card. Okay, and you're not going to believe this. This happens to me a lot. The reason this wasn't working, I'll go back just to show you it does work. It will work on Zoom. I actually didn't have the cable going into the input on the capture device. So again, this is my DSLR camera, and I can put it wherever I like. I can focus it. And once I've done all that, then I have all these camera sources. So right now, as you can see in real time, I've got my live camera here showing me. I've got a second camera source, a webcam. I have a third source with the digital microscope and USB, a fourth source with my DSLR through my capture card going into the computer. You may need a USB hub, and we can talk about some of that later as far as dynamics of getting some equipment. I also have a video loop playing, and then I have a website. As many things as you can fit on a page here in Streamlabs OBS you could use. So it's really cool in that sense. Now let's quit Streamlabs and let's go right back to Zoom, because I don't want to mislead you here, and I sort of said that it was showing that Zoom is not a great possibility. Actually, Zoom will work in this sense. Let me just start my meeting here. Okay, so we're back on Zoom here, and I just want to show you that the capture device will work. So what I could do is click on that, and it will show that camera. So it's perfectly fine. I just had the cable plugged in incorrectly. But the point I'm trying to make here is, even though I can switch from one camera to the next, so I can switch from that camera, I can immediately then say, let me go to my webcam that's set up that gives me another angle, and then I can go to my digital microscope, which is showing my delete key, and I can go back to my FaceTime camera. So what I have to do, and there is a shortcut, if you look at it here, you can press that to simply do the switching. So you could switch, you have to do that though one at a time. You're not going to have that ability, as we saw with Streamlabs OBS, to have all of those images and video feeds happening at the same time. So for me, the argument is, I think Zoom is not really doing that live streaming that we're talking about to really have that full potential for interactive and immersive real-time use of multi-cameras and multimedia setups. So certainly with all things, it's up to you whether you decide to use Zoom for some version of this. My recommendation at this time, though, is that it's not really doing, Zoom will not deliver a live stream in the way that I'm talking about doing live streams today, which is using a multi-camera setup. So some additional software considerations to think about then, and a lot of these are available for free, so you don't have to purchase anything, and that's particularly cool with OBS, which is 100% free. So I use YouTube Live, and certainly you would need a place like YouTube or Twitch or a number of other places. Just Google live streaming platforms. There are probably 10, 20 different ones out there. I use YouTube Live. Again, it's free, it's integrated with Google, and it allows me to quickly start a live stream. When you work in Streamlabs OBS, they will allow you to link to all of your possible live feeds, whatever those might be in your social media. I mentioned Switcher Studio. Switcher Studio certainly is another way to capture multiple angles, and it's more powerful than Zoom in terms of doing the live streaming of multicam setups. It doesn't necessarily do the media that we're talking about with OBS. The one disadvantage of Switcher Studio is the price. As you can see, it's about $40 a month, $39 a month, or even $75 a month if you want more powerful tools. So I think personally that's a little expensive. That would be a really expensive fee to pay. Who knows how long we'll be in this virtual mode of teaching during COVID. So I don't think Switcher Studio for me is going to work. You could also look at Twitch Studio beta. Twitch is very popular for video game live streaming, very popular with younger people. So if you want to use Twitch Studio, that'd be another possibility there. And then the one we'll be talking about today is called Streamlabs OBS. I sometimes refer to it as Streamlabs or just OBS. In the old days, it was called OBS, and there's an old version of it. They've since upgraded it. You just go to Streamlabs and download either for PC or Mac, and it's really easy to use once you download it. When you first download it for setup, you will be asked to do some things. I won't go through this in depth. If you get stuck, you could ask me, but it'll simply ask you to agree to some license agreements here. It will also ask you to choose the install location for the program. It's not a huge program. And then this is where you could connect with all your social media. So you could connect to Twitch, to YouTube, Mixer, Facebook, or other platforms as well. And that then allows you to decide where the delivery locations will be when you actually do these multicam, multimedia streaming live sessions. And then OBS will ask you to set up your mic and webcam. Very easy to do. When you do the initial setting, keep in mind when I add more sources later, as I was just showing you on that video, I will be customizing things extensively. So I wouldn't worry about in the setup of fine-tuning everything, because once you get into the software, you can really work on some things. So again, this is showing you the initial layout. It's a black screen, and I can start adding my sources. I can work on all my various audio sources I might have from a mixer, from a microphone, desktop audio, YouTube, and so forth. And this is very powerful. Quite a few of you asked me recently, how can I customize the levels of what's playing on YouTube and also have my voice going at the same time? You can do that using Zoom, but it's much easier to customize this, set this up once with customized templates here in Streamlabs OBS, as opposed to having to do it on the fly every time using Zoom, or maybe if you're doing a recording in something like Canvas Studio, which is also very good, but which is not designed for live streaming, of course. So now let's take a look at the main workspace of Streamlabs OBS to give you a better sense of what it's like. Okay everyone, so let's jump right into a tutorial with Streamlabs OBS. So this is the software that you'll be using to create everything in your live experience, your live streaming experience. And I think probably the best thing is to start with a brand new canvas. So we will start with a new scene. And one of the things you're going to see is that when you start with a new scene, the entire canvas is blank. And what you might think about is each of these scenes is a palette, much like you could create on a blank canvas anything that you want if you're painting something, a landscape or a portrait. So this is really a blank canvas for you to attach events, devices, different visual, audio information such that you can create anything really that you want on this blank canvas. And so in just a second, we'll get to exactly what this will look like in terms of creating this brand new scene. So first off, if you want to look at what is available in the program itself in Streamlabs OBS, you can certainly look at all the possibilities here on the left side of this panel. So these are preset overlays that allow you to get going immediately with any number of live platforms. You'll notice in here some of these actually look a little bit like they're designed for video games. Some of you maybe know that Streamlabs OBS and a lot of the live streaming software or platforms out there, whether YouTube or Twitch, are often designed for gamers to play at the same time, to track their progress, to do screen recordings of games that they're playing through, and creating community of the sort that we're familiar with in online education. So this would be the place where you would find any of those overlays you want to use. I like to start from scratch, but you're welcome to certainly look at anything there. If you click on a number of the buttons on this left bottom side, they may take you to tutorials, to additional advanced features of Streamlabs. You can kind of just play around with this and see what is available. We're not going to go through all those today. And by the way, if you want to get advanced tutorials on Streamlabs OBS, one of the best ways to do this is to go to YouTube and type in Streamlabs OBS or OBS tutorial. And you get some really great YouTube tutorials. I used a number of those just to try to learn what I was working with here. And one of the most important ones really is the very bottom icon. And again, I'm doing this all on the Mac, so things could differ if you're working with any live streaming software on a PC. These are all your settings, and this is not unlike the settings in Zoom. It can be very involved initially. You can certainly leave some of these as defaults. For example, if you're not doing live video gaming recording, then you're not so much concerned about bitrate and performance of your video and so forth. And you're maybe not so much concerned about whether your computer will be able to handle some of this. So if you start with a general, you can go through, and if there's anything in here that you want to adjust, you can always again go online, look at the tutorials and so forth. So these go in order of the stream. This is where you want to put if you're logged into any of your channels. So if you want to do a connection to Facebook, if you want to do connection to Twitch or YouTube as I am, then this is where you would put that information. And again, you will need a platform to use to do your live streaming. This is on output, so this is what kind of video is going to be, if you will, pumped out by your computer. Again, this would be key if someone was doing a lot of gaming and had a lot of video and maybe audio stuff going on simultaneously. Probably not for my own purposes going to be adjusting anything. Now this is kind of important if you want to record files or videos of what you're actually doing in your live stream as a backup. If you're not doing that on your live streaming channel, then this is where you would choose the recording path for those recordings. So that's kind of handy just to know where that is. You can decide on the recording quality, high quality, indistinguishable, lossless quality, and then the recording format. I would generally do an MP4 would be fine. So that is the output settings. You can go to audio. We'll do some more with audio with our audio mixer set up later, but this would be very key because if we have audio devices plugged in, such as mixers, if we had different kind of sound engines that we want to plug into Streamlabs OBS, this is where we're going to have our audio devices recognized on video. Again, I wouldn't go through and adjust too many of these. I think they're probably going to be fine for you. You can adjust hotkeys. Hotkeys would allow you then to immediately customize when to start a certain feature. It could be a new scene. It could be something happening with a video capture device. It's very extensive. It could be muting and unmuting. It could be something with your desktop audio with the video and so forth. I will very likely be doing a lot of that myself with my Stream Deck, since that is one of the purposes. So what I'll do, like I have for Final Cut Pro, is set up a custom board here where I can control things on the fly when I'm doing my live streaming. And I still have to learn some of that stuff. I'm not going to fib here and say that this is super easy. There's a lot. This is a really in-depth program, but it's one that I think is well worth our time. I'm not going to really work on the advanced settings. If I want to look at scene collections, this could be where I might have my scenes stored or my overlay files stored. I can decide on some notifications. I can click on appearance if I want a night theme versus a day theme. I think I'll go with night. I like that a little better. I can also choose remote control. This would allow me to control some settings from my phone. All you have to do is scan the code here, the QR code, and that will allow you to do this from your phone as far as controlling scenes and settings during a live stream. So that could be very cool for you. Virtual webcam allows you to display your scenes from Streamlabs in video conferencing software. If you click on here, this has performance metrics. It will tell you about like drop frames. It will also tell you the current capacity of your CPU, your memory on your computer. So it's running at 4.5%. I'm definitely good on that. So I'm back on my main home screen, and this is where I can create this scene. So again, I've created a new scene, and I could name this something if I wanted to. I could also create scene transitions if you wanted to do transitions like in a video program. I'm not really going to mess with that right now. So the first thing I might want to do then is to add to my new scene, which is blank, a source. So what you can think about is the sources are anything that will appear on this blank canvas that will allow you to accomplish any number of things, whether capturing a scene from your computer, from an application, recording from any number of attached cameras, recording from a video capture card that is connected to your computer via an HDMI cable, and so forth. So I can click on that and add any number of sources, and these are all the possible sources. The truth of this is probably you won't be using a lot of these. It's just like Zoom. You don't have to use every feature. If you figure out though 2 or 3 sources that you want to use, you can start there and grow just like you might with Zoom. So if you don't want to use any widgets right now, and widgets are kind of fun, something like the spin wheel for example, and it'll show up here, and then I click add source, and I can name it something, which is kind of cool. Then in the case of this will have various settings for the spin wheel, which could be the color. It could be categories and so forth. This would be if I'm trying to offer any prizes to people or something like that. And so I again can place this anywhere on the screen. What's cool is once you add a source, you can customize it anywhere you want. It is very simple to do, and that way what you see on here, it's a what you see, what you get kind of editor. You can simply decide how you want that to appear and so forth. If I don't want that, I just click the remove minus key. Very easy to remember. It prompts me and I say that's okay. So once I'm done with that, I can go back and add another source to my scene. And since I'm not too concerned with the widgets, I won't really look at those right now. Let's just maximize this. Now, some easy ones that could be something like an image. I can add the image source. All I do is hit add, and then I name it. So it might be, my banner image or something like that. I'll add it there. And then I'm trying to see here if I have any good images just to look at. I'll just add this image. This is from one of my videos. And I will again decide where I want that to go. So if I did want it as a banner image and I wanted to constrain it or resize it in any number of ways, I could do that. And I could place it again wherever I like. So I have an image there. It's just a static image, very simple. Now I can also then continue to add. So we'll add another source, and this time maybe I want to add let's do a media source. So this could be anything that includes a WAV file, an MP3, basically any kind of video file, or even a GIF, which is an animated image file. So I'm going to click Add Source, and then I will choose a new source here. And let me add it. And okay, so this is just a stock video file. And the cool thing is I can loop. So if I want this to play continually during my live stream, if it's kind of an effect, or it could even be a tutorial. Maybe you have some key points that you've created in a video file or a slideshow in PowerPoint. Very easy to take PowerPoint, save that as an image file of various sorts. I can click loop on there. Once I click loop, then what that means is that will continually loop as long as I have it going. Again, at any time I can go to my scene area here, move away from my sources, and I can switch scenes. I could do that with a switching device like a Stream Deck or with a remote app and so forth. So what's cool about that is I'm not constrained to just one of these scenes at any time. I can have as many as I want. There's also an ability, if you go into one of the edit modes, you can actually allow yourself to do editing on a new scene in real time while you're live streaming, but your viewers will see what's currently streaming on that one scene. I don't recommend that right now. It's kind of an advanced feature, but it's a possibility. So it's kind of cool so far. So I've added that. Let's add another source here. And maybe this time we want to get a browser source. So this is kind of cool. It can be a website, third-party widgets, or HTML. If you're good with HTML, you can certainly do whatever you want with it. So I already have this source, but all I have to do is, well, let me show you from scratch. So I'll call this my YouTube feed, and I'll add the source, and then I have to go in here and simply put in the URL that I want to use. Anytime you add a source, you have all these customizations, right? You have custom CSS. You can do a lot of stuff with HTML. You can customize the width and height of it. You can do really whatever you want. And again, if you don't want to do any of that, just hit done, and then the source appears here, and all you have to do is increase the size or decrease and so forth. And so that'll be a live YouTube feed that'll be playing. We can add another source, and as you might begin to see here, this is really infinite. I can go on and do a window capture, and you might be familiar with this in some of the other programs like Canvas Studio and even Zoom where you're doing screen shares. So I would hit add source, and then I will select a new source. I will call it just window capture or something like that, hit add source, and then at this point it will ask me to pick any number of currently open windows. I don't have a lot of these. So if I wanted to, let me see if there's a good one here. I guess I can just choose my desktop, and it'll list all these, and they're pretty self-explanatory. So you could also go on here and add an image slideshow. if you wanted to display a number of images. And once you do that, you will go down here and add files or add a directory. So I would just have to go on here and choose a few. So we'll just do a couple here. And what's nice about this is this has built-in transitions, so you don't have to do a lot in terms of setting things up. We'll just do 2 files. These are cooking images. And I can choose on here what kind of transition I want, a swipe, a slide, and so forth. I can, again, go back in and adjust the images. So I probably will just want to resize this a little bit. It's coming up really large. And this could be something that you could have playing, like if you had a series, if you're teaching like photosynthesis or something like that in an ecology class or botany class, and you wanted to have images playing, and these could again be slides from PowerPoint or any kind of source, you can have these appearing somewhere on your live screen. And as you see, they're actually going through the cycle here as we're going, so we can kind of see what's happening. My browser doesn't look to be active currently, but in any case it will, when you go live, it will show up and so forth. I just figured out why I had to click on refresh browser when scene becomes active. Okay, so now it should do it when there's movement detected. So far I have a number of elements. I have a custom slideshow, I have a local video file, I have a website going, I have a banner image, just a static image. I can go on and have images, captures of open applications. So if I want to have a tutorial going, like I might do in Canvas Studio or in Zoom, I could do that as well. And let me show you some of the video capture elements, and those are pretty easy to do. So that's going to be a video capture device. It could be a built-in webcam or a capture card. And at this point I'll choose new source. So we'll call this main cam. Add the source, and then it's going to ask me anything that's plugged in. If I have webcams plugged in, if I have a capture card plugged in, as long as it's plugged into my USB on my computer, it will detect all those possible video capture sources. So I can choose the custom size. I can then click on what I want to use here. So then at this point, I will choose which device, depending on what's plugged in. I don't have a lot going now. If you have a built-in camera, FaceTime camera like I do, that will appear here. So I'm going to hit done. And then I call this my main camera. So again, wherever I want this to show on my screen, I can have it appear, right? It's very customizable. Down here, by the way, you can click this to hide that source, and you can bring it back. I can also lock it. If it locks, it means I can't adjust the size of the window and so forth. But if I double click it, so I have now that set up. By the way, you can go in later. We won't talk about that now in this basic overview of the software. You can go in and customize things like brightness, exposure, contrast on anything on the screen really, so that's possible. So I have my FaceTime camera. Let's add one more. We'll add a web camera, so this one. Now this could be useful if I wanted to have my webcam set up. I could maybe have it on my Stream Deck. I don't have a clamp here, so I'm just doing it really low tech. So let's see how it works. So I'll add a new source. It'll detect it because that's plugged in. So we'll go back. As you remember, that was a video capture device. I'll hit add source, and I do want to create a new one and name it something different. So I'll call it side webcam. What I would recommend on this is if you had different scenes you're trying to show, if you're teaching a pottery class or something like that, what you would do is you would name this kiln if you had a camera on the kiln, and then that way you can switch to the kiln or have the kiln video playing in real time as you're working on other things, preparing pottery or whatever you're doing. So I will hit add source. Again, it'll ask me what that source is. I'll click my webcam. It's the only one plugged in. And once I do that, I hit done, and magically, I think it's pretty cool, it appears there. And as you see here, it is live. So you're seeing my hand here in real time, and I'm talking too. So you could get an effect here where you can have an entire studio space set up in such a way that you're showing everything at the same time. Or you could have one of these, because I can resize things or create a new scene down here on my scene browser. I could have just the big view of this, And then I could, once I go live, start switching this, either using a remote app, using my keyboard, or using something like the Stream Deck here. So that's pretty cool too. I wouldn't necessarily have to have everything playing at the same time. If you think that's a little too busy, what you could do is constrain that just to switching between cameras. But the key here is going to be, because everything is set up ahead of time with your scenes and your sources, however you decide to set those up, you don't have to worry in real time about doing all the clunky things like you would in Zoom, where switching cameras and maybe worrying about it if certain cameras are working or not. What I like about this is I can see in real time that both my cameras are working. And if I wanted to, I could add yet another device to it. And so just because we can, I thought maybe we'll add another webcam. I picked up another webcam. This was a flash sale on Amazon for like 20 bucks. So I'll put that one here. And let's add another source. What I'm trying to show you here is just the possibility of all this multimedia live streaming you can do. So I'm going to add another video capture device source. And you can see at this point it's very easy. I'm not really doing that much. I'm just simply adding a new source. I'm naming it. We'll call this one the mixer cam. It'll be pointing at my mixer here. And then I have to choose the option. Now, because I plugged this camera in second, even though it's the exact same webcam, it comes up as number 2, so that's pretty easy to remember. I hit done, and now I have that video source. So if you're feeling like this is information overload, I don't know, I love it. So again, what I can do here is to show you, right, everything is happening in real time. When I go live, my audience is going to see this. And again, I can go in and adjust the image, because certainly the webcam image here, it seems a little luminous to me, although it kind of has a cool look. I also have my video light going, so that's probably creating some of that shadowing and real nice purpley color to it. So anyway, I have another camera. Let's get crazy here, and we'll add my digital microscope. And every time I use this, it inevitably I forget to bring a clamp. I'm having issues with clamping this down. And then it should show up here on my menu. Yep, it's right there, digital microscope, add source. Okay. Now what I need to do, as you can see I'm out of space here, I just need to zoom in on something so you can see that. This is a piano key. Maybe that's not that interesting. Oh, almost got it. Okay. Next time I'll have my clamp ready. So that's just showing one of the keys, the moving image key off the Stream Deck. So I have that now. So I showed you in one part of this video the idea that in one of the conventions, the Democratic Convention recently, someone was switching scenes live from their home. So it really does give you a sense of the potential of something like this. So we'll stop it there, because what I plan to do is to go through and do a sample live stream so you can see how this happens in real time. But I think you can see here we have all the video sources going, a digital microscope, this webcam here, I've got a webcam here, and I've got my main computer cam going. I have a video loop in the left corner, live website in YouTube playing, and then I have a banner image here, and then down here I have an image slideshow. So again, the customization is totally up to you. You can do anything on this blank canvas, and then all you have to do is hit go live. We didn't really go over the mixer settings. The mixer settings will allow you to customize the sound coming from your various sources. I could go on and then actually customize the volume, my desktop audio, my microphone, my YouTube audio, any media sources. I can also do audio monitoring to be able to just check my levels in real time. Again, if I had my mixer plugged in via USB, I could also incorporate that sound. So a lot of possibility here, definitely using your audio settings. But if you're doing something simple like maybe YouTube and one microphone and maybe a sound file, pretty easy to manage here with your mixer. So this is the initial setup to take you through the software. This was certainly not a deep dive, but it was a brief overview of some of the possibilities here using Streamlabs OBS. You can customize it as much as you want, and if you get a chance to watch my test stream here on this same video, I think you'll see some of the possibilities of a multi-camera, multimedia setup for your online class or for your professional meeting here at LTCC. Hey everyone, so just one real quick tip here. I'm doing this on a Mac, and I noticed what could be called a glitch. So if you want to add a new source, that is a window source, like if you want to bring in Zoom or something like that. You want to use a browser source as well. If you go to select browser and add that, you'll have some choices about what website to choose, so I could pick YouTube and so forth. Let me just remove our browser source real quick. And let me show you the same thing with a window capture. So window capture is pretty handy because you can capture any open or even closed program on your computer. So at this point, it doesn't really matter which of these windows that you pick, but if you pick a window, whatever you pick, and you get something not happening, or you get, in this case, it's just a really small window, I can resize that. That actually is fine. That's not a good example. It's just a system window it's picking. But if you ever add it and you don't see this colored bar, or you don't see anything happening in the window, there's a real quick fix for that on Mac at least. You would go to your system preferences. You will want to click on security and privacy. And then at that point, you can click on screen recording. And the tip on this, it's just like if you're using the screen recorder option in Canvas, you have to have this checked. If you don't have it checked, then you actually won't have that as an option in your program. So it's a very quick workaround. It's just basically your Mac is making sure that you're allowing permission to whatever device you're trying to use, in this case a window or a browser capture. It's kind of a silly thing, but it's part of the security system on a Mac. So if that happens to you, very easy fix. So just go into your security and privacy settings on a Mac, and that should make it good to go, and you'll be able to then have that as a source on your OBS live stream. Hey everyone, just a real quick note. I wanted to just mention this because I think I may have been confusing about this. So there are actually different versions of the OBS or the Streamlabs program that you can get online. They're both perfectly free, totally available for free. So the earlier version, at least for Mac, is called OBS, and that's what's open here on the right hand side, and you can see this is version 25.0.8. And then on the left-hand side, we have Streamlabs OBS version 0.23.4. So looking into this, I discovered that OBS, this program on the right, was first available as the free open broadcasting software. And then later on down the road, Streamlabs created this version. It's the exact same code. The theory behind it is that the Streamlabs version is a little more user-friendly in terms of navigating things at the bottom, adding your sources, and controlling your scenes. And then also there are all those templates that I went through in my software tutorial on Streamlabs OBS. So I may end up actually using one or both of these. It just kind of depends maybe on my mood and what I want to get done, but they're both going to do the exact same thing. As you can see here, I can add cameras, I can add anything I want to either scene, and I can simply link and start streaming or do an offline recording as well. So whichever version you use, it should be perfectly fine. It's just a matter of preference. Feel free to use either OBS or Streamlabs OBS if you're on a Mac. Now certainly when you're working inside of OBS and Streamlabs, you want to think about control. I presented to you the video on the power of the Elgato Stream Deck. The Stream Deck allows for some very powerful things in terms of live controlling of software. And the example of this I use is Glenn Weiss here, who was live switching, according to Twitter, the entire Democratic National Committee convention from his house. So pretty amazing that this can be done, and as you can imagine, when you're doing a setup like this where he's working with 30, 40, 50 different video feeds at a time, he really has to have control. Most of us are not in a situation like that where we have to do that level of switching in real time. We are, however, probably pretty desirous to have some control over our setup. So I like to use the Stream Deck in all my applications, and certainly in Streamlabs OBS. One of the things I can do is have a custom setup that allows me in real time to control all my cameras. So if I want to switch very quickly from camera 1 to camera 2, if I want to all of a sudden do something with Twitter or have an app or something pop up on the screen, I can do that using the functionality within Streamlabs OBS, but it's much quicker to use something like the Stream Deck by Elgato to accomplish that in real time. So I had to mention this from the DNC convention because to me, this is a great example of really where we're all at now in terms of virtual conventions and of course virtual teaching, virtual meetings, and all that kind of stuff. Now let's then talk about some possible purchases. Like anything else we might be working with, we might have to buy some things. I certainly have, and it's part of just trying to deliver better trainings for all of you is to purchase some of this stuff. So for example, if you talk about software, unless you're using Streamlabs OBS, if you use Switcher Studio, you would have to pay for that. So that's my recommendation, not to maybe go with that option. If you want a Stream Deck, again, there are 3 versions of it. Check out my Stepping Up with the Stream Deck to learn more about that. So you might either decide to purchase the $99, $149, or $249 version like the one I have. You probably also need a USB hub. And a USB hub looks something like this, and it allows you to plug more than one USB device in at a time, depending on how many plugs you have. And that's very advantageous because in a lot of cases, you're going to be sucking up all your USB ports. Like if I have 4 in here and I use 3 webcams and a video capture card, I'm done, and then anything else I might have plugged in, like a USB microphone or my Stream Deck, wouldn't necessarily allow me to have room for those devices. And some devices need what's called USB 3.0, so you really do have to check on that to determine, based on your specific technology, what you might need. In addition to the hub, I would recommend an extender, like the one pictured up here for $12.99, and that is just simply if I want to get my camera over there across the room, unless I use an app, which is an option. You could use an app to do a virtual cam from your iPhone, like the one that's shooting this video here, and then that would be another location camera. It could even be outside if you have, of course, Wi-Fi, connected with Wi-Fi. And if you're doing that, then you eliminate the cable. But most of us are probably using something with a cable, whether it's the capture card that I talked about that is USB to HDMI for a DSLR, or a traditional webcam or a digital microscope, which will require a USB extender. You can get one of those for as cheap as $12.99 on Amazon. Again, something like a microscope, depending on the quality, could be $35.99 and up. And then a capture card, like this one was $59.99. You can get a really good one, an Elgato one, the same company that makes the Stream Deck, for over $100, just depending on how many frames per second you want. A lot of video gamers want really fast performance, and thus they focus on buying the highest equipment. You can always get stuff that works for you that doesn't necessarily break the bank. Hey everyone, I just wanted to mention something really quick. What's cool about OBS or Streamlabs OBS is that you can do recordings of everything on the screen. You would just want to click on the button there that says Start Recording. If you click right above that on Start Streaming, it will record and also stream to YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or your other favorite social media streaming platforms. I mention this because sometimes you may want to do a tutorial in your office or workspace, your art studio, your science lab, in which you will show 2, 3, 4 different cameras at the same time from multiple angles, but you don't necessarily want it to be a live version. You want to fine tune it and do it offline. So for that purpose, you would simply hit Start Recording. As you saw with that button, it will save the file in any number of formats. You could go to your preferences page and choose. Just do not choose the highest quality. And if you try that, there's a warning actually that will pop up. So really handy to know this if you have any intentions of using OBS or Streamlabs OBS for recording of tutorials. Now, this is an image of a USB hub. I mention this because I've noted some issues that if you try to plug in multiple cameras, webcams, or other devices that might take a drain to a USB hub that's unpowered, you may actually not see those devices working in OBS or Streamlabs OBS. If that happens, one surefire way is to make sure either you've plugged into the powered USB port in your computer directly, or use a hub like this. The key is a hub that has a power supply, and that will allow for the device drain that sometimes can have an effect on your system. So reach out if you have any questions about that, because I've been problem solving some of these issues over the last few days, and I found a pretty good resolution using my powered USB hub. So what I'm showing here is that I have my Stream Deck set up, and I didn't put my camera on a tripod, so it's kind of shaky, but I just wanted to show you this. So what I'm doing is I've set up hotkeys, and these hotkeys in the preferences of OBS or Streamlabs OBS, which I'll put up on the screen right now, will allow you, using a keyboard or a Stream Deck, to turn on and off cameras, microphones. You could mute things, you could do all sorts of fancy things with settings. So this is kind of cool. I'll actually be testing this at the Coyote Kickoff happening here in September 2020. So it will allow me, using the Stream Deck, by pressing a button to basically have a custom feed, not unlike a TV feed. I've talked about this in the video focusing on the DNC convention and how someone was actually doing this much more sophisticated version from home. So really cool. If you're interested in this, we could talk about options for either a Stream Deck or doing it with a Hotkeys setup. It's very cool and allows you more control of your live stream or your OBS recording. So right now what we're going to do is I will go into a sample live stream to show you the ins and outs of how this works in real time. I gave you a preview of that, but let me show you practically what this looks like if it happens in real time here. So right here, this is just showing you using my camera, my setup. What I was interested in this musical experiment was trying to see where my various cameras would be to capture all the action. I did it kind of quick, so I didn't necessarily fine tune it, but this shows you kind of the surface I'm working with, which would require me showing different angles and different camera images because of everything complex happening at the same time in different places in this musical performance. Okay, so to frame the multicam setup here, what I was trying to do was to set up a series of cameras. Again, these are all plugged into the computer via USB or a HDMI cable using a converter for my DSLR there. Camera 1 is on the left there, and I've taken up a system of labeling. You can see the number in the back cameras, so that's camera 2 on the left, camera 1 rather is on the right, and I also label the cables for easier organization. My DSLR is right there. That is input 3. That's going through a capture card. So I can take any HDMI source and run that through OBS. And then off screen, I have my webcam. Don't forget, you can use your main FaceTime or webcam on your laptop or computer as an additional camera. And that's really handy, particularly if you're doing a tutorial, because then your face is very prominent on the screen if you're working with other windows and you have demos of software or websites. Keep in mind, anything I want to set up, I can do in OBS or Streamlabs OBS. As I showed you in the video as well, I can trigger sources. Any of my sources I can turn on and off. I can hide them from my audience if it's a live stream or a recording. I can mute microphones if I have a USB microphone that is for interviews. I can mute that on and off if I don't want extraneous noise. That bar right there of the green, yellow, and the red, that is your audio levels, and it's very easy to control all your audio sources, whether from browsers, external devices, websites, and so forth. For the sample live stream, you see my 4 camera sources, the 2 webcams, the DSLR on the very right with a macro lens, and my FaceTime camera on the very top left. That is coming from the computer. I also had a YouTube channel playing there, one of my videos. I could trigger clips, audio sources. I could pull video files from the computer. I'm able to, of course, in real time resize any of these windows on the screen. I also can add text, so I just wrote the text. This is a test sample multicam setup. Anything you want to do, you can customize that all. And then if I want to do different scenes, so let's say one scene I want to have 2 camera sources, a particular website, and some text and an audio file. That can be scene 1. I can then very easily click on OBS or Streamlabs OBS to scene 2, and that could be 2 cameras, a different website, a browser source, a zoom capture or whatever, and different text on the screen. So using the scenes navigation in your Streamlabs or your OBS program is very easy to do, and that allows you to customize scenes for specific tasks or specific recording instances that you might be doing in your office, in your studio, or in some other site. So what I'll do now, and you're already hearing some of the audio below, is I'll just play the audio that I created as well as the video. You'll see it live. At any point, if you're tired of it or whatever, I know the music might not be everybody's kind of style, you can just click to the next section in the video and we'll wrap things up talking about pedagogical approaches and some overall impressions here doing a live stream using Streamlabs or using OBS. All right, I hope you thought that was really cool. I think as you can see with a real live stream over Twitch or YouTube using Streamlabs OBS, you can really create an immersive and interactive screen or experience for your viewer, for your student, or some of you might even be doing some of this for meetings where you're working with demoing stuff. Particularly like in fields like culinary arts, in all the lab sciences, in the art studio classes, maybe even in a yoga class, it could be really advantageous to use some of these multi-camera setups. My wife for a while was doing some virtual yoga, and one of the challenges was she had a webcam set up, but it wasn't really capturing everything. You know, in yoga, there are different poses that you do on the ground, standing up, maybe resting against something. And as a result of that, you might need more than one camera. So there's actually a lot of valid uses, I would say, for a multicam multimedia setup in a number of the disciplines that we teach. And so we could talk a little bit about pedagogical ideas. Again, most of us are in this business because we want to deliver high quality education to our students. So I'm looking at here 5 pedagogical reasons that you could use a multicam multimedia setup in something like Streamlabs OBS. One is the possibility for real-time observation, the idea that students can actually watch in real time when you're demoing something like a chemistry experiment or a biology concept. The other is information and activity control. As I mentioned with the demoing of Zoom, I can do camera switching in real time, but it's one camera at a time, so I don't have the best possible control that I would using a more powerful studio like OBS. The other is the possibility for multiple perspectives and locations. If I'm trying to teach something like I showed you here in a studio and I want to show different things in real time, it's a real pain to move a camera or to switch a camera manually. Instead, if I have all of them set up in my studio space, I can more adequately and clearly explain a concept that I might be trying to teach to people. And of course, related to that is the idea of interactivity. So if we want to interact with our students or colleagues in real time, one of the great ways of doing that is by really upping our technological game and thinking about things like our lighting, thinking about our video feeds, thinking about the quality of our audio, and I would say thinking about multiple perspectives that we can offer using live streaming of multicam and multimedia setups. And the last one is simply aesthetics, and it's just something maybe for me is if I'm watching one of my favorite YouTube channels, I like when one of the content creators has really thought about delivering a high quality product. It shows that they spent the time. So it's not even just aesthetics, it's professionalism. It's showing your students or your work colleagues that you care and that you've spent enough time working through your setup, whatever that involves in terms of multiple cameras or multimedia. Okay, in the way of conclusions today, in this video on Streamlabs OBS multi-camera and multimedia setups, we considered the possibility of using some new technology and software to create a more immersive learning environment for your students or your work colleagues. While there are some associated costs and some learning to be had with any of this, the value of incorporating some of the approaches in this video may be worth these short-term costs. With anything in this Educational Futures series, I'm saying it requires more out of you. It might be new technology, it might be purchasing something, it's spending the time and learning something. But my argument is that by focusing on innovative forms of technology, forms of pedagogy, by really thinking actively about the future, so to speak, we have a better opportunity to create more professional, more immersive, and interactive spaces for our students and our work colleagues. So there's a lot to think about, a lot to consider. I would love to sit down with any of you over Zoom as we move into fall. If you want to pilot some of this and maybe even use it in the winter, we could set up some time and I would problem solve step by step with you based upon the technology that you have available and maybe some of the technology that you want to purchase. So as in all cases, if any questions come up about pedagogy, about anything related to educational futures and any of the technologies we've been talking about, reach out to me here at the college, send me an email, and I would love to help you out. So good luck, and I'll be back with another video shortly.